What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be looking at and ranking from worst to best the albums that released in 2022. I'm going to be using this tier list that I found. I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. There's really not going to be much editing throughout this because once we start, we're really just going to dive into it. If you guys are new here though, make sure to drop a sub because we're on the road to 50k. And with that being said, we're going to get started. All right, so other than these projects right here, I've listened to everything else from top to bottom multiple times, so we're really just gonna dive into this now. If there's an album here that I haven't listened to or I just don't know of that you think I should check out, let me know. But we're just gonna work our way from top to bottom, starting with Don FM. This is one of the first albums that we got this year from The Weeknd. Now obviously my channel is centered around hip-hop and rap mainly. I do listen to other genres, stuff like rock, pop, punk, even pop and all that, but as for Don FM, it's not an album that necessarily I really ever expected me to enjoy a lot. I did like the album and I do like The Weeknd, and you guys might have this as great or album of the year, but I'm personally just gonna say it's very good. I like a lot of songs on here. I would say my favorite song from this project is probably Less Than Zero, but I obviously don't want to discredit it. It's just not necessarily the type of music that I always listen to. Now going to DS4, I personally think this album was great. You have stuff like Pushin' P on here, great collabs with Future, Thug. I think it's one of Gunna's best projects that he's released so far. And then on to one of the first albums that I actually forgot dropped this year is Bird's Eye View, or From a Bird's Eye View by Cordae. I'm gonna say that this album's very good. I would honestly put it above The Weeknd's album for me, and I think this album got slept on. It has a lot of great highlights on it, stuff like C. Carter, the collab with Gunna's really cool, and I think it also has the song with Lil Wayne, Super, which both of those are hits. Now on to OTBT. Something I want to say about this album is Ian's probably my favorite artist that dropped an album this year because we didn't get anything from Juice, and I also really like Roddy Ricch, and I don't even see Feed the Streets 3 on here. Honestly, looking at it now, I also don't see a Kodak album, Dirk's album. There's definitely a couple albums that didn't get listed on here, so I will probably think of something to add them on myself while I'm editing. I'm gonna put OTBT at the very top of great. I'm not gonna say it's album of the year because there is one other project that dropped this year that I liked above everything, but OTBT is definitely one of my favorites. Now on to Youngboy. There's a few Youngboy projects that released this year, like The Last Slimito, and then all the other mixtapes he released this year I'm not seeing on here as well. But to be fair, Colors is one of the only projects Youngboy dropped this year that I listened to the entire album, and I'm gonna say it was good. There was a lot of songs on here, stuff like DC Marvel, Fish Scale I think is on this project. Those songs are fire in my opinion, and honestly Colors was probably my favorite Youngboy project this year. I'm also gonna put Lil Wayne's project at good. There wasn't a lot on here that stood out to me from this project. I thought it was cool that there was a Lil Tecca collab. Some of the features on here were cool, but overall nothing that really stood out to me a lot, especially for a Wayne project. And then on to Enely Choppa, Me Versus Me. This is something that had a lot of, I would say, build up to it. We kind of waited for this album for a minute. If I remember correct, it kept getting delayed as well. This is another album that I'm just gonna put it good. I would say I liked it more than Wayne's album, but overall, other than the song with Thug, there wasn't a lot that stood out to me from Enely's album. Now on to one of Yeat's projects that he released this year, 2 Alive I believe this one is. I think when Yeat dropped the deluxe, which I'll probably just add on to this because there's no separate part for the deluxe, I really enjoyed the deluxe with both Uzi collabs, and this project was the first Yeat album that I actually listened to myself from top to bottom, and I'm gonna say it was very good. I'd put it right behind The Weeknd's album. And now for Snot's album. This is another one that I forgot released this year. This album has probably one of my favorite storytelling projects. I think it's really cohesive, and I actually want to pull the album up because I highly recommend you listen to the outro to this album. And Blue Moon's also another standout track for me, but this outro is just one of my favorite outros to any project I've heard. I highly recommend going to listen to this. this. So I'm gonna say this album was great. I really enjoy Snot's projects, and I hope he's working on something else for the new year. Now, DaBaby and YoungBoy's collab tape. This is something that I listened to the entire thing like 2 or 3 times with a homie, and I just didn't really find much that I enjoyed on here. I don't really think DaBaby has been doing the best lately with the projects he's releasing, and YoungBoy's just dropped so much this year that this is one of the only projects I listen to. Same with Colors, because they dropped at the beginning of the year, but obviously during summer YoungBoy was just going crazy with releases. So I'm gonna put this in mid just because I wasn't really a fan of much on here at all. And then for Fivio Foreign's Bible album, this is something that I was excited for at the start of the year because I thought he was having a great 2021 and a great start to this year, but the album was a little disappointing to me. I don't know if I would necessarily put it in mid. I'm just gonna put it in good though. It definitely wasn't one of my favorites this year by any means. And then D-Day, this is a little project I believe put by J. Cole and his team or his label, whatever it's technically considered. There was a couple of fire songs on here, but overall nothing that I really go back to and listen to a lot, so I'm honestly just gonna throw it in good as well. Now, Donda 2, this is probably the most unfinished sounding album that I've heard this year. This is something that I wouldn't have thought before hearing it that I would do, but I have to put this in mid just because it's just a not finished project. There was a lot of good ideas on here. I really enjoyed the song like Broken Road. I believe that's with Don Toliver, and then We Did It Kid I think is with the Migos and Baby Keem. But other than that, like the Jack Harlow collab I think is terrible. There's just songs on here that are so unfinished. This honestly shouldn't even be on the list in my opinion. I Never Liked You. This is another album that is just great. I'm actually gonna put this above Gunna's album, behind OTBT for me, just because I'm personally a big fan of Ian. But this is one of my favorite Future albums that I listened to from top to bottom, and I enjoyed it right off the bat. Now, Pushing T dropped an album way earlier this year, and I remember going to listen to it because there was a collab with like Kanye, Cudi. There was actually a lot of cool features. If I remember correct, I think Uzi was on here. Yeah, after pulling up the track list, there's actually a lot of cool features. Pharrell Williams, multiple Kanyes, like I said, Kid Cudi, Don Toliver, Uzi. So I would honestly put this album in just good. I would say I liked it better than maybe Wayne's album, but then again, I just don't really go back to this project that much. But anyways, I would say Denzel Curry's album was just good for me as well. I'll put it above YoungBoy's, honestly. This is probably the best one so far in this category, but I just haven't went out of my way to listen to Denzel Curry a lot lately. I think a lot of people might honestly disagree with this placement, but obviously this is my opinion. For what I think is probably one of the most overhated albums this year was Come Home, The Kids Miss You by Jack Harlow. I had a lot of hype for this album because I just gotten into Jack after he had a really good last year and start to this year, but there was a few things with this album that I did not like. I think that for the most part, the same flow was used multiple times. It kind of got repetitive that it seemed like every song was just doing the same thing. It would start out in a certain way, then change to a certain way, and Jack would just bring the same kind of bragging bars, flows, all of that. But I still do think it's overhated. I think people might put this in bad or mid. I'm not going to say that. I'm honestly going to put this at the very bottom of very good because I did like the project. I Got a Shot's probably my favorite song on here, but I like the collab with Drake. I thought the one with Lil Wayne was really cool. And now moving on to Kendrick's album. This is the first Kendrick album since I've been listening to hip hop that released, and I actually listened to the night of its release. So I think the experience for this album is gonna play a little bit of bias into it just because, like I said, it was my first Kendrick album actually getting to dive into like that. But I'm not gonna sit here and just say because it's Kendrick, it's album of the year or even great. For me, I'm just gonna say it was very good. I'll put it at the top of very good, but it's not something that because we waited so long for, I'm just gonna put it album of the year great. You might disagree with me. I don't think the album's bad by any means, but definitely not one of my favorites this year. Now, probably another disappointing project overall was Post Malone's album. I did enjoy the collab with Leroy on here. I like Cooped Up with Roddy. I think the song with Doja Cat, the one that got pretty big, was fire, and honestly this album was good. I'm gonna put it in very good. I actually will put it right behind behind Kendrick's album, but as a post album, this is definitely the most disappointing one that I've heard so far. Now, honestly, Nevermind is an album that I've listened to maybe 3 or 4 times now, completely from top to bottom, and I just can't get into it. I know that people are probably gonna think I'm just going with the mainstream or the common idea by putting this in mid, but this album to me is mid. I do not like it. It's one of my least favorite Drake projects. I've given it multiple chances. Honestly, if you look at my whole tier list, this is probably one of the weirder ones that you'll ever see, but obviously I'm catering it towards exactly what I listen to. Now, another album that I'm actually gonna put right on top of great, right behind, or honestly, I would put this over OTBT if I'm being completely honest, is Kid Cudi's album, Entergalactic. I made a couple of videos on the sales to this album because they weren't that good, but other than that, the album itself was amazing. I thought it was from top to bottom a really good project. I think I saved like 6 or 8 songs on here, like In Love, New Mode. There's just tons of songs on here that I think got overlooked. This is a great Kid Cudi project. I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. And honestly, before I start this tier list, I thought I might put OTBT in album of the year or keep it at the top of this, but thinking back at it, honestly, I think I've listened to this album maybe not more than OTBT because it's been out more, but I've been going back to it more. God Did by DJ Khaled. This is another album that I mean, it had a cool songs on it. We had obviously the Juice song, Juice WRLD did on there. There was the song with Gunna and Roddy I liked. I mean, there was a lot of good songs on there, but it's just another DJ Khaled album at the end of the day. It's never really gonna be bad. I'm just gonna put it at the very bottom of good. Now, my favorite Yeet album that dropped this year, which is Lyfe. This is going right on great. I'm gonna put it right behind Future's album. This is my favorite Yeet project that he's released so far. Just looking at some of the track lists, Flawless is fire, Up Off X, Out the Way, Talk was really good. This is just a good project. Honestly, my favorite Yeet album. DDG is somebody that I had not listened to before he did release this album, and I don't really have much to say about it. I know there was a song with Eneli Choppa and Polo G that I liked, so I'm gonna put this in good, but I'll put it above DJ Khaled. Honestly, actually, I'll put it right behind Lil Wayne's album. Nothing that was too crazy to me, but he's definitely an artist that I'm gonna keep going back to and checking out now. Lil Baby's album, if you watch the channel at all, I've only made one video on Lil Baby. It was on this album, but I'm not a huge fan of it. I do think that Lil Baby has good songs. I don't hate him by any means. I listen to Lil Baby's music, but this project, at least as an album, which keep in mind, that's how we're ranking all of these. I'm not just looking at a specific song. We're ranking these off of the entire album. I've gotta put this in mid for me. I'll put it at the very top. Honestly, just reorganizing this a little bit, actually. That's probably the proper way I would have this category, but overall, as an album, it was like 25 to 30 songs that just all sounded the same. For an album, this is a terrible listening experience in my opinion. Her Loss is an album that honestly I didn't know I needed. A collab tape with Drake and 21, which was fire. I liked Rich Flex on here. The collab with Travis was fire. Broke Boys is fire. I'm gonna put this right behind OTBT. I feel comfortable with saying I like Cudi and Ian's albums more than this. Now, it's a little weird that this album was at the very end, but Heroes and Villains, I've gotta say, is album of the year for me. Niagara Falls is on here. The song with The Weeknd and 21. There's so many interesting songs on here, and I think that as a whole is an album listening experience. What could really top a producer album? The whole point of a producer album is to basically have Metro Boomin be able to speak to us through the production of the album. So I would say this album not only has the best production this year, but I think it's just a good album in general. Album of the year in my opinion. And that's not recency bias, I wouldn't say, because I mean, I've listened to all these albums more than this because it's newer, and I still feel this way about Metro Boomin's album. And then because a few albums that I've already mentioned that didn't end up on here, I'm just gonna edit these on screen. But for Dirk's album 7220, I would put that somewhere in good. I would say it was a fairly decent Dirk project. And then also No Stylist. That's an album that I'm gonna put at the very end of great. That album I thought was fire. Then Ken Carson's project I'd put at the very end of good. I'm not a huge fan of Ken Carson compared to how I am with Lonely. Real quick, there's just two more projects I wanted to add on. I'm gonna say that DC the Don's My Own Worst Enemy, that's another album that I know dropped this year. I would put that in very good, probably just at the end because I'm obviously doing this post editing. And then Roddy Ricch, Feed the Streets 3. Roddy's one of my favorite artists, still dropping music, so I would put Feed the Streets 3 at the top of great. But with all this being said, like I said, if there's an album down here that you think I should check out, or if there was something on here that wasn't on the list and I didn't think of to get added on here, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Like I said though, this was the best tier list that I could find, so let me know your thoughts. Let me know what your favorite albums were, what your album of the year was. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.